Perhaps one of the most misunderstood words in this community is the word persisting. Why do I know? Because I am asked very often the question, how long do I need to persist? As if persisting was a technique, as if persisting was a chore, as if persisting was something you don't want to do, as a matter of fact. So, if you are still confused about the word persisting and what it really means, this video is for you. And to start with, we are going to read one of the many times that Neville used this word and see what he really meant here. By persisting in the assumption that you already are the person you want to be, you rise above all doubt, fear, and belief in the power of outside conditions or circumstances. And your world inevitably conforms to your assumption. So Neville often talked about persisting in the assumption or persisting in the wish fulfilled, which both mean the same thing, by the way. And even though when you read a quote such as this one, I think it would be easy enough to understand what it means. However, still many people understand that persisting as efforting, as like a technique that you have to practice, as a chore, as if you had to do homeworks basically, so you could persist every so often as much as you can, so you would manifest your desire. However, this is not what persisting is. Persisting simply means that you dwell in the state, in the feeling, in the identity that you actually want to be in. If you want a specific desire, it's because you want to dwell in that feeling, isn't it? You want to dwell in that state of being. Well, this is what persisting is. You simply dwell in the state of being that you actually say you want. Because you say you want that desire of yours, don't you? So if you want, for example, to be wealthy, well, your job is to dwell in the feeling that you are wealthy, that you are rich, that you live in abundance. This would be persisting in the feeling of being, in that case, being wealthy, being rich, being abundant. So why is it not a chore? Because isn't it what you want to be and feel? Don't you want to feel wealthy, rich, abundant, knowing that you have no more worry about money? Well, this is persisting in the feeling, not just when you have your stuff, but before. Your job is to entertain that feeling, step into that identity of being the person you actually want to be. And when you do that, it's simply called persisting in the assumption or persisting in your desire fulfilled, persisting in that identity that you actually want to identify with. So, no, persisting is not a technique because guess what? Even once you have your desire in the physical world, if you quit persisting in knowing who you are as a rich person, to take the money example again, if you quit that feeling of being the person you want to be, if you stop persisting in that feeling, well, most likely it would mean that you are now persisting in an opposite feeling or opposite identity. Maybe in the identity where you feel lack instead of wealth. In that case, you would still be persisting in a feeling, but it would be the opposite feeling of that which you say you want. Now, to take the example of relationship, many of my clients, when they are manifesting a specific person, they are manifesting an ex. And the story usually goes like this. At first, they had a version that was great, loving, full of attention. I mean, the great person that my client was dreaming about, they manifested that amazing person. However, eventually that person changed. From loving and full of attention, they became distant and even really the opposite of loving, right? But the thing is, I usually don't need to dig too deep to find out that my client had shifted. They're the one who have shifted. They came from being confident, being in the state of being loved and adored and chosen, to a state of insecurity, not being good enough, and all that good stuff, right? So eventually, because they stopped persisting in the wish fulfilled of being loved and adored and chosen and feeling like a queen and a goddess, they started persisting in an opposite feeling. It started sometimes very slowly, subtle, but became more and more and more heavy on them. They fell into that state. They started identifying themselves as the old self, for example. They started feeling not good enough. They started feeling fear of being left, of being dumped, and you name it. And sure enough, because they started persisting in that different assumption, well, they manifested that different version of their SP all the way until they were dumped. And this is the story of most people manifesting a specific person, for example. And that happened to myself as well. First, you manifest a version of your SP that matches your state of being, the state that you have been persisting in for a while. Then you start seeing a change. And it is because you have started to change within yourself. Nothing happens outside of you. When you see your SP coming from a loving person to a very unloving person to the point that they disrespect you and dump you, you know that you have made the shift within first. Not willingly, but something has shifted within you. You shifted into a different identity that manifested that version of your SP. But it's all you, because in your reality, they are not independent from you. They don't have independent will from you. And this is why in my SP course, for example, I insist on the fact that you take full responsibility for what happens to you, but not because I want you to blame yourself no more than I want to blame myself, but because you recognize that nothing exists outside of you. Nothing exists outside of imagination. So, since that word is definitely mostly misunderstood by people manifesting a specific person, all that is asked of you by persisting is persisting in the feeling that you are chosen. And when I say feeling, by the way, I would say the same thing Neville said. I don't mean emotion. I mean feeling of being, right? Your identity. Persisting in the feeling of being loved and chosen and really important and the best thing that has ever happened to your SP. This is the feeling that is asked of you to persist in. And why it's not a technique? Because that's the feeling you should be living in for the rest of your life, as long as you want to keep your relationship. Because even if you had the SP tomorrow, but you start falling into a different state, you started identify yourself with the opposite of being loved and chosen and all that good stuff, Well, you would be slowly but surely starting to persist in the opposite feeling that would lead your SP to leave you. Because again, and I've said that in many of my previous videos that you can check, by the way, your specific person doesn't have free will, meaning they don't have independent will in your world, in your bubble. Within your consciousness, your SP and everybody else, as a matter of fact, they have to conform to who you are being. So this is why next time you hear the word persisting, next time you feel that, oh, what am I doing wrong? And next time you want to ask me, how long should I persist? Well, you should easily and effortlessly, and by choice even, persist in the feeling of being the person you want to be. And it's not a chore because it's supposed to be what you actually want to feel. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching, guys. Please give me a thumbs up if you like the video, comment, ask your questions, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.